Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ronald Addinall. I am a social worker and I have specialized as a clinical social worker and a sexologist. And I'm a lecturer in the Department of Social Development here at UCT. And I want to welcome all the prospective students, parents, family and friends of prospective students that are here this afternoon who are interested in learning a bit more about what we offer in the Department of Social Development at the undergraduate level. I'm going to be spending some time with you in the next 20 minutes telling you about our Bachelor of Social Work professional degree program, as well as the major in social development, which are the two options in our department for undergraduate students. So how I'm going to structure the presentation, I'm shortly going to be playing a set of slides that will play on their own. I'm not going to speak to them. They're there for information about our department and about our staff. And while the slides are playing, I'm going to be sharing with you about the two offerings I have just referenced. And I'm on my own today, so for the questions that you might have, could you please place any questions in the Q&A tab? Because when the 20-minute presentation is up, I will then utilize the last 10 minutes of my time to respond to the questions that are placed in the Q&A tab. So let me get the slideshow going. Excellent. So it gives me great pleasure to tell you about our two offerings. So firstly, the Bachelor of Social Work program. What is important to know, you've heard me use the term program. So you'll often hear what is referred to as a program and a degree. So generally what is meant by a program, it is normally then a degree that is a professional degree, and it is normally a 4-year degree, and it culminates in the person being able to register for the profession that they have been studying. So the profession of social work, why would you even consider social work as a possible profession for yourself? If the fact that people, families, groups of people, communities and society in general, the fact that across these levels of existence, that people face and experience struggles, challenges, problems, trauma, loss, poverty, prejudice, discrimination, injustice, and various other social realities that negatively impact on the well-being and the quality of life of people, families, and communities. And it affects you to the degree where you have a desire that you would want to do work where you can actually try and address and support people, support groups of people, families, communities, support society in trying to address these various difficulties and challenges that I have referenced, and if you feel that that would somehow fulfill your purpose and would give you a sense of job satisfaction, then definitely the profession of social work would be one of the options that I would suggest that you'd be considering. So essentially, as social workers, in a broad stroke, is we empower the most vulnerable, and we are trained to be change agents in the world and within our careers. So the Bachelor of Social Work degree, as I've mentioned, is a 4-year professional degree, meaning that once you've completed the 4-year Bachelor of Social Work degree, it means you are then automatically eligible to register with the South African Council for Social Service Professions. That is the professional statutory body in South Africa. All professionals, whether you're a doctor, a psychologist, a social worker, an OT, a physio, for example, a teacher, once you're qualified, you are required to be registered with this professional body or a professional body that oversees the profession. As professionals, we are trained to work ethically. We work with vulnerable people. So the professional body is there to oversee that professionals practice in an ethical way. So with the Bachelor of Social Work professional degree, you are then automatically eligible to register, and you then are a qualified professional social worker able to practice. When it comes to the training of our social workers, essentially there are 4 significant modalities or methods that social workers are trained in and are then able to practice in. So firstly, there is what's called micro-level practice, also often called casework. And this is where social workers are trained to work with individuals, couples and families who are experiencing, as I've already alluded to earlier, a wide range of problems, difficulties and struggles within their lives. So for example, as a social worker, I might be working with a child who has experienced maybe physical abuse. I might be working with a young person that's maybe had a traumatic rape experience. I might be working with a couple who are experiencing problems within their relationship. I may be working with a family who are struggling to deal with, maybe, let's say, the father recently lost his job and the family is going through significant financial difficulties, just as a few examples of the casework level of training that we have as social workers. Then social workers are also trained to do what's called group work. And essentially what this means is we are able to bring together people into a group situation. And this is often because people have a shared experience. Let's say, for example, I don't know, I work in a high school and we've had a number of young, of our female learners have unplanned pregnancies. Or I work in a hospital where there are clients have newly been diagnosed, say, with cancer. A particular area that I've worked in as a clinical social worker is I have for many years ran a support group for transgender and gender diverse individuals who are realizing that their gender is different to the gender they were assigned at birth, and they are needing support because they need to come out to themselves, they need to come out to their families, they may need to make transition changes in their schools or at work. But yeah, so social workers are trained to work with groups of people who have a shared problem, challenge or struggle to help them overcome and empower them. Then the third is community work, is the next level of training that we as professional social workers obtain. And what that means is when we practice at the community work level, this means, for example, as a social worker, I might be working in a particular geographical community, for example, and in my community, there is significant issues that impacts on the quality of life or the well-being of the community. An example from my own practice, I used to be a military social worker before I joined academia. And I worked on a military base, so the whole military base was my community. And one of the issues were a lot of families were struggling, and one of the reasons families were struggling is that a lot of the wives of the military soldiers were unemployed because they would move around a lot. And because of that, it resulted in relationship problems and all kinds of struggles. So I then established a community work project where I brought the wives, the unemployed wives together, and we developed a project to upskill the women in the community so they were able to start their own micro businesses, etc. So that's community work. And then the fourth is that as social workers, we are trained to do research, because we need, by doing quality evidence-based research, we as social workers contribute to a better understanding of, the types of problems and difficulties and struggles that, people and communities and groups of people face. We do research on our treatment methods to see if they really are effective. If we want to understand a particular problem in more detail and in more depth so that we are better able to develop ways to help. Those are just some of the examples of the research that we as social workers are trained to do. The training of social workers involves two components. You are on campus some days of your training where you're doing the traditional attending lectures, attending tutorials, but from the second year onwards, social work students are also do what's called field practice. And what that means is you are placed as a student in organizations so that while you're learning, for example, how to work with individual clients, you're in a placement where you are working with individual clients. When you're being taught how to facilitate groups, you will do a field practice in organizations where you're actually going to facilitate and run groups. And the same for community work. You'll be taught on campus how to develop a community work project. And in your field practice, you will also be doing community work projects. That's in your second, third, and the fourth year of your training as a social worker. So that at the end of your 4 years, that is why you're able to be a registered professional social work practitioner, is you have been taught the knowledge, the skills, and the professional persona, ethics, etc., to be able to practice as a social worker. One of the questions I'm often asked by prospective students is, I want to work with people. I definitely know that. I'm not sure, do I do social work? Do I do psychology, for example? And the recommendation I'm giving you now is, is with the support of my psychology colleagues. What I will often advise students at this point is to say, I would strongly recommend you consider the social work degree. As a social work student, you are required to do sociology and psychology are two of your subjects, and you need to choose one of those two to take it all the way to the third year. So if you do the Bachelor of Social Work degree and you take psychology to the third year, you complete your fourth year. You are then a qualified professional social worker and you're able to practice. The challenge for the psychology route is because often students have the idea they would like, for example, to be a clinical psychologist. Now, to be a clinical psychologist, you have to have a master's in clinical psychology. So if you want to work with people and you have a Bachelor of Social Work degree, you can already do that after your fourth year of training, and you can register and you can work, as I've already described, across all of these, methods of intervention. What often happens is then if you're going the psychology route, you then need to do an honours in psychology, and then you would have to do a master's in psychology. And most universities only take about 6 to 7 masters psychology students a year. So what happens is a lot of students that have gone the general degree route get to the honours in psychology position, and then large numbers are unable to get into a clinical psychology program, which means you don't actually complete your professional training and you then have to take different routes. So, for example, a counselling route, where with a Bachelor of Social Work degree, you are a rounded, completely registered professional after your 4 years training. You can still pursue the psychology route, or social work in South Africa has now developed that so well that we now have specializations in social work. And you could specialize as a clinical social worker. So clinical social workers and clinical psychologists are both professions that are specialized in working in mental health, in psychiatry, and doing your more complex psychotherapy. And you then have the options of various, tracks in psychology and social work with your Bachelor of Social Work degree. So where do social workers end up working? If you've looked at one of the slides, social workers are everywhere. So once you qualify as a social worker, social workers work for government. So government has various departments, whether it's in the Department of Health or in the Department of Social Development, who employ social workers at a provincial level and at a national level. Social workers also work in non-profit organizations and NGOs. Social workers also work in the corporate environment, and social workers can also register a private practice and work in, and start a private practice. Social workers work with children, we work with adolescents, we work with adults, and we work with the elderly. So the options and the possibilities for the social work profession, it is a very well established profession internationally, and there are various work opportunities. So that, in brief, what I would like to say about our social work program. I will address some questions in about 5 minutes. The second option that we also do offer in our department is a major in social development. So for students who are going to consider a general degree, let's say a BSOC side general degree in the humanities, say for example at UCT, which is a 3-year degree. When you do a general degree, one of the requirements is you need to choose 2 majors or major subjects. And that's where the major in social development comes in. So general degree students, so for example, a general degree student can decide, I want my 2 majors to be, say, political science and social development, or gender studies and social development. And why would a person consider a social development major as one of your majors in a general degree? Is if you're interested in and want to develop an understanding on how to address what are socio-structural factors that impact on the development of human well-being in countries and regions, at what we call, so social development is about looking at the macro level, looking at the almost like the big picture. So for example, we look at poverty. So the big picture is why does poverty exist and what keeps poverty in place? And then that is understood and researched, and then that normally leads to, well, then we need to develop policy and we need to develop programs that can address these structural factors that result in these kind of macro level issues that impact an entire society or an entire country or an entire region. So the social development aims towards working at what is called at a macro policy level, which also then results in program development to create larger enabling environments for inclusive development to benefit entire communities, regions and countries. So it focuses on the social, it adds the social lens into economic development and economic conditions that impact on the lived experience of communities and societies. And it puts, as I said, the social lens in economic development. With a social development major, where can this take you? In our department, if you have a general degree with a social development major, we offer an honors in social development, a master's in social development, and a PhD in social development. Where do people with a social development focus end up going? Often persons with social development training background, for example, are employed by provincial and national government entities that are working on policy development and program development, and also on the international arena, for example, in organizations like the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the SADC entities, where they need people on board to help investigate and do research on what are the macro level issues here that's contributing to the problems and the struggles and the strife in a particular country and a region, and what policies would need to be developed, and ultimately what programs would need to be developed that could then bring about at the macro level the change that hopefully will trickle down to improving the quality of life of people on the ground. So that's the Bachelor of Social Work degree and the Social Development major that we offer. Just to know that at postgrad level, so basically if you have a Bachelor of Social Work degree, I often say it's similar to if you look at medicine, you have a GP, a Bachelor of Social Work, we often call the person a generic social worker. So a person with a Bachelor of Social Work is like a GP in medicine, is a generic social worker in social work. You can do further specializations. Our department offers 4 specializations at postgrad level in clinical social work, in criminal justice, if you want to do forensic work and work within the criminal justice environment, there's a specialization there. We also have a specialization in program planning and management, if you want to run organizations and work at a management level. And as I've mentioned, we also have a master's for social development. And then we also offer, you can do a research master's and research PhD in our department in social work and in social development, as well as in social policy and planning. So social workers go all the way up until a PhD level in their training. Social work there's 6 specializations that have already been recognized in South Africa in social work by our council. There you can become a specialist in clinical social work in healthcare, in adoptions, in probation, in occupational social work, and in forensic social work. And fairly soon, we're probably on our way to have school social work also being recognized as a specialization in the profession of social work. And that brings me to the 20 minutes of the presentation. So I hope that the content that I've shared has been at least coherent and that I made sense and that you were able to get some of the content or some more information from the slides that we're playing. Just that you know that we are the oldest social work department in South Africa. We were established in 1968. So that is the content. I'm now going to take the next 10 minutes to address your Q&A, and I see we have a number of questions in the Q&A. So let me address those. So firstly, someone asked, what percentage do I need for math to do social work? So for the social work, to apply for the social work program, we have no, there aren't any specific subjects that you're required to have taken in high school, and we don't prescribe any percentages for any of your high school subjects. So if you have a university pass, meaning you have a matric pass and you're eligible to apply to a university, then you are eligible to apply to the social work program. So is maths a core requirement? No, it is not a core requirement of the Bachelor of Social Work program. Another question, and what if you want to work in the adoption agency? Well, then social work is definitely the profession for you. So adoption is very much the domain of the social work profession worldwide, and especially in South Africa. And as I mentioned earlier, it was one of the first specializations in social work that was established, which is the specialization in adoption. So as a social worker, you then are able to work in the field of adoption, and if you specialize further, you then can work both in the process of dealing with private adoptions as well as state and government informed adoptions. Then there is another question. Once finishing a degree in social work, can someone further their studies internationally and also get opportunities internationally without having to do a bridging course or additional studies? So the short answer is yes. Of course, we want to train our social workers to work, in South Africa, and as South Africa and in Africa, we have, there are many challenges and difficulties and struggles, and we hope our social workers, will invest their knowledge and their skills and their expertise here. But we're all individuals, and yes, we all may have aspirations of where we want to take our careers and where we want to go. So as you may know, UCT is an internationally recognized university, and our degrees are internationally recognized. Our social work degrees are exceptionally well recognized internationally. South Africa was one of the first countries that quite a while ago, because there were various pathways to train as a social worker. But for quite a number of years, the Council for Social Service Professions and the universities decided to establish the 4-year Bachelor of Social Work degrees. And that's been the norm of how South African social workers have been trained. I can tell you that South African social workers are very sought after internationally, and every year I'm writing reports and recommendations for social work, our past social work students who are in New Zealand, in Australia, in the UK, in various parts of the US. If I just think of the recent students, and yes, you can also then study at other international universities to further your training as a professional social worker. And also we have social workers from elsewhere in the world that come to our department and actually train. I just recently, one of my students is from Sweden, and she's just completed her master's in clinical social work with us. Once finishing a degree in social work, can someone, okay, so that's, and then there's the last two questions. Which social work specialization is often highly regarded, and are there any reasons why? I wouldn't say one is more highly regarded than the other. It's basically the specializations is about in what area of practice you want to specialize. The two popular ones in our department is clinical social work, because people want to train as psychotherapists. The social development masters is also very popular. The criminal justice is very much if you're interested in forensic work. And as I said, social development if you want to do management. So they're not popular because they're just popular. It depends on how a social worker is wanting to specialize. Is sociology studied in the course of social work? Yes. Sociology and psychology is required at first year level, and then in your second and your third year, you have to choose one of those two to take to third year level. And those are all of the questions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you for being interested, and I wish all of the prospective students here all the best with your options and your choices. I'm sure and can understand it's overwhelming. I wish you all the best and enjoy the rest of the presentations. Go well.